and welcome to Ag PhD. I'm Brian Hefty.
And I'm Darren Hefty. Thanks for joining us. You know, it's fitting, Brian, that we're in a soybean field, yet in a soybean field is where our rootworm problems may be starting for next year. We're going to talk about VT3 rootworm resistance and how you can avoid that problem on your farm in today's show.
Well, also in a soybean field like this one, we're going to get it ready for corn next year, and in order to do that, we might put some anhydrous on. We're going to talk about the steps today that you can take on your farm to make that anhydrous application go well and make your crop in 2013 as good as it can be.
We've got a nasty weed of the week this week that we're going to be talking about how you control it both this year and in future years. But first, here's this week's Farm Basics.
Farm Basics is brought to you by the Liberty Link trait and Liberty herbicide from Bayer. The most reliable weed management solution, Liberty Link and Liberty herbicide are the link to efficient row crop production and sustainable weed management.
During our Farm Basics time today, we thought we'd talk a little bit about what we're seeing in fields right now. Now, if you're a non-farmer, you know, you might say, well, what do I really care about what's going on in fields? But there are just some things that are kind of interesting that you don't see all the time. So one of the things that Darren and I were talking about right before the show was how, like on this plant in particular, there's this little, what looks like a bow tie. Darren, you want to explain that?
Well, when you see soybean fields around harvest time, what farmers are most worried about is we're going to have some shattering out here. We're going to have some loss in the field where the bean pods actually pop open and the beans drop on the ground. We can never pick those up. So they're just going to become weeds for next year, or at best fertilizer for our next crop. So when we're looking at fields late in the season, if we start to see some of those pods opening up, we call that shattering. Now, this bow tie effect that Brian's pointing out, we see that a lot of times if we have some anthracnose in the soybeans. If there's a certain disease that strikes soybean plants real late in the year, usually, when we have a little anthracnose in a plant, a lot of times we get this bow tie effect with some pods. You'll also notice some black lesions down the side of the soybean stem. And you know, this is all very normal because as the plant breaks down, its one goal in life is to produce seed. So as plants break down, we can start to see where some of the weaknesses are in that field or with that variety. In this case, with this variety, it has a little susceptibility to anthracnose, so as soon as it was weakened late in the year, filling the pods, we saw some anthracnose set in.
Okay, so this bow tie effect, it's basically pods that kind of wrapped up together, but beans were never really produced there, right?
Yes, there were certainly beans in here. This pod...
Well, they never filled out, let's put it that way.
No, there were full beans in here. There were 3 full beans in this pod.
So you
pods
really think
split open.
You really think they split open and wrapped?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's how it works.
All right.
Yep, so we just lost 3 beans here, Brian. And in a square foot, as you well know, with 3 soybeans, we've got about 3/4 of a bushel per acre that we lost right there.
That's why this is a big deal. We got to make sure that we're not having this happen. So what could a farmer have done to prevent this?
First of all, farmers would treat earlier in the season with disease protection, which we did in this case. We did treat about the time the soybeans were at full bloom to first pod development. We did treat with a fungicide to try and protect from diseases.
But only once, probably could have done it twice.
Yeah, we could have done it twice, and we could have maybe chosen a different product. Maybe there's another fungicide that would have been a little stronger on this particular disease if we would have known this is the one that was going to strike. The other thing that we could do is try and harvest a little earlier. Typically, farmers try to harvest their soybeans when they're 12 to 14% moisture. These beans got down to about 8 or 9% moisture by my crunch test guesstimation.
The problem is, like this year, what ended up happening in fields all over the country, because it was really hot and it was dry, there were areas of fields that were ready, but other areas, to get to that spot, you couldn't get there because the other areas weren't ready. And that's one of the biggest challenges with soybeans and why farmers every year will lose a few beans to things like this.
So for me, what I take away from this is, you know, you can't ever stop scouting fields. If you have crop in the field, I look at right now as a great time to scout. Now for many guys, this year they were blessed and they got done with harvest early. Maybe you don't have any crop left to scout, but you can still be looking at things on your stalks, on your roots out in your plants, doing soil tests, all those things. Farmers really have to keep an eye with every day that there isn't snow cover on the ground of what's going on in the fields and how they can get better in the future.
And even as a non-farmer, you can download the free Ag PhD Harvest Loss app, and you can walk out into any soybean field you want, and in a square foot, roughly 4 beans in a square foot is going to be 1 bushel of loss. That's a big deal this year. You're talking $15, $16 a bushel. That's huge. You start multiplying that out over 1,000 acres, you got a lot of dollars.
Well, there's certain things like that that farmers can control to help increase yields, and one of those things is weed control, especially if you had our Weed of the Week. We'll show you how to control this tough weed later in the show.
For years, FarmLogic has been the easiest and most convenient way to keep up with your farming operations. Well, it just got better. Introducing FarmPad for your phone. You always have your phone with you, so entering records as they happen is as easy as a touch of a button. Chemical database, GPS, service records, and more. When you do it on the farm, save it on your phone and it's backed up forever. Call or visit farmlogic.com for a free trial and find out why FarmLogic is the best decision tool for the farm.
You can't fill a barrel any fuller than its lowest stave, and your crops can't do any better than the nutrient that's in shortest supply. Your yield potential is only as good as the weakest nutrient in your fertilizer program. Give your crops more than just NPK. Prescription apply all the micronutrients your crop needs, each one customized for your crop's potential. MicroLink, linking yield to potential.
Harvest season will soon be over, but don't put away your equipment until you bring it into Titan Machinery, your Case IH dealer. Take advantage of our Uptime Maintenance program. Uptime is Titan's preventative maintenance service designed to eliminate costly downtime during the short working season. Our technicians average more than 10 years of experience and use a comprehensive checklist to find problems before they slow you down. Call Titan Machinery today to schedule your Uptime service so you can spend the winter worry-free. Titan Machinery and Case IH. Better solutions.
Looking to maximize yield? Quick Roots is a microbial seed inoculant that allows the plant root to explore a greater volume of soil, the key to higher yields. Quick Roots continues to generate yield response on corn, soybeans, wheat, and more. Quick Roots is applied to the seed so the live microorganisms go right to work, enhancing seedling vigor, increasing the uptake of certain nutrients, including NPK, and expanding root volume. Maximize yield on your farm this season. Call TJ Technologies or your local dealer and get your Quick Roots today.
Speed, strength, and efficiency make Capello corn heads a head above the rest. Built with polymer components that exceed industry standards, Capello corn heads continue to push the boundaries for maximizing grain retention while using less energy. Visit CapelloUSA.com and learn more about Capello's state-of-the-art chopping technology that cuts cleaner, allowing your horsepower to remain where it belongs, with your combine, so you can harvest faster in all weather conditions. Add to that an amazing folding feature and it's clear to see why Capello is a head above the rest.
All right, Darren, let's talk about fall fertilizer. And the number one question that we get every fall is, can I put my nitrogen on in the fall or not?
Well, you certainly can, depending on your type of ground, the lay of the land. There's a lot of different considerations that go into, is fall a good time to put on nitrogen or not? Now, for example, we've got some river bottom ground. It's subject to flooding. You know, 2 years ago, it went underwater, Brad. Yep. This year, I didn't have a drop of water all summer. So you tell me which year we're gonna get. Well, we don't know. And so when you don't know, you just gotta play it safe. We aren't gonna put any nitrogen down on the bottom ground that can flood because some years it floods and some years it doesn't.
Okay, and it comes down to two things. One is money lost, money that you're going to spend and, not recover because that nitrogen goes down the river or down into the groundwater. And number two is the environmental factors. So in other words, yes, you can put nitrogen out, and yes, you wasted some money, but not only did you waste money, now you ended up with nitrogen that got in somebody's water somewhere, and that's not a good thing. We've got to be responsible using our nitrogen, or we as farmers are going to get more and more regulated as time goes on. So we want you to be very careful with your nitrogen use, and the number one thing you need to know is you have to test your soil for cation exchange capacity. Get that cation exchange capacity test done, and then find out what the reading is, multiply that number times 10, and that will tell you roughly how much nitrogen your soil can hold at any one time. So for example, if you had a 20 cation exchange capacity number, multiply that times 10, that equals 200. So you can have about 200 pounds of nitrogen. If you already have 40 pounds in the soil, you can apply another 160 this fall if you want to.
Well, what I get, Brian, is guys that say, I've got clay soils. I know my CEC is around 20 or even just a little bit better. I'm great. I'm not
No,
going
they
to worry
don't know
about
what
it
their
at all.
CEC is. They just say, I've got heavy ground,
Well,
I'm fine.
here's where I'm going. They say, well, I've got a 22 for a cation exchange capacity. What do I have to worry about? Well, here's what you have to worry about. You may be raising 150 or 200 bushel corn now, but what are you going to be raising 10 and 20 years from now? You're probably going to be raising a lot more than that. Maybe it's 250, maybe it's 300, depending on where you're at. Well, if you have those fields that are yielding 300 bushel, I don't care what your CEC is, you really have to be concerned with how much nitrogen you're putting out and when you're putting it out. Here's part of my thing is, okay, let's just say, yeah, your soil can hold everything you want to put on this year, but when does your crop need that nitrogen? You know, a lot of that nitrogen it's not going to need until June or July. Well, that's a long ways in advance. You've got to protect that nitrogen. You've got to put a little bit out now, a little bit out later. In our trials, we almost always see more yield if we spoon feed that nitrogen out just a little bit as we get to different growth stages with the corn.
Okay, I'm not going to go quite that far that we're always going to see, or even almost always going to see more yield. If you do this thing right, and you're not going for a tremendously high yield, and you do have heavy ground, you can put it all out in the fall if you choose to. But the most important thing when you're going to be applying fertilizer is what type of fertilizer are you putting on. So for example, if you were to go out and put urea on, or you were going to put liquid 28% on, you've got a lot greater chance of loss than if you put anhydrous ammonia out. The reason why is anhydrous ammonia, that ammonia, is going to convert to ammonium just about right away after it goes in the soil if it seals up properly. Okay, and ammonium has a positive charge. It has a positive electrical charge. Soil has a negative electrical charge. So just by nature, just by physics, we're talking positively charged ammonium binding with negatively charged soil. That's a good thing. What we would encourage you to do is wait until the soil temp drops below 50 degrees and preferably even below 45 degrees and is still falling, and then put your anhydrous on this fall, and you should be relatively safe.
Well, when you talk about that positive and negative charge, there's more to it than that, Brian, because the plants actually want to use that ammonium form of nitrogen. When they're taking in ammonium, they can just put it right to work inside the plant. If they bring in nitrate nitrogen, they have to convert it to ammonium. So they have to spend energy to convert it. And that energy that they're spending converting this nitrate back into ammonium, lots of energy they could have spent on growth, on producing more yield, and lots of positive things.
But here's the problem. Ammonium eventually is going to convert to nitrate because of bacterial activity in the soil. So what we would encourage you to do this fall is put on N-Serve along with your anhydrous to help stabilize that nitrogen. Again, think about the two factors we've discussed already. Saving money for you, okay, and when nitrogen is high priced, we sure don't want to lose it. But then the other side is the environmental side. We want it in that ammonium form longer without turning to the nitrate so we don't lose it into the groundwater.
All right, well, let's talk about this anhydrous, Brian. You put a lot of anhydrous on your ground. I've been typically using liquid nitrogen and other forms of nitrogen. One of the problems with using anhydrous is when we're dry in the fall like this, you've got to have that ground seal up or you could potentially lose anhydrous.
Yeah, this is one of the areas where we've really seen a benefit to strip till and no-till on our own farm. We still have some conventional till acres. I like doing different tillage practices just so when somebody asks me a question, I can say, yeah, we do this on a lot of acres. I like this about this system, I like this about this other system, but you know what? I'll just tell you this fall, we absolutely have more moisture in the ground where we've been strip tilling or no tilling. So in those fields, I can go out with anhydrous. I don't have a lot of worry. But in the conventional till ground where it is bone dry, if that nitrogen, if that ammonia doesn't seal up very well and you see puffs of ammonia going out of the soil, that's not a good thing. You have loss. You better stop doing that right now and just wait until spring and put some liquid or some urea on if you want.
Well, don't be thinking that anhydrous is bad. It's the only form of nitrogen that's going to have some loss. The liquids and the dries can have loss as well, and you need to protect those whenever you apply them.
But here's the thing about anhydrous that I don't like. It's the most dangerous form of nitrogen, so you got to be really careful and really responsible when you're using it.
Well, you definitely have to wear goggles. You have to wear a long sleeve shirt, protective rubber gloves that are specially designed for anhydrous.
And have somebody knowledgeable who's running the machine. So on our farm, there are only a couple of guys who are going to run the anhydrous machine. I'm not putting Darren on that thing. I mean,
I
just can't do that.
I don't want to be. Well, you know, you've got to be careful about these things. So you want somebody that's dedicated to the job, not somebody that might run off and film a TV show or something in the meantime.
Well, once again, anhydrous ammonia is a good form of nitrogen to use in the fall. Just make sure that you're doing it on ground that's appropriate to apply nitrogen in the fall, not river bottom ground, areas that could get flooded out, things like that. And we like anhydrous because it turns to ammonium just about right away. That will hold in the soil as long as your cation exchange capacity is not too low. So just make sure you're testing your soil for CEC or cation exchange capacity.
Well, one other thing you want to watch for on your soil is our weed of the week. Can you identify this week's weed?
For lower costs and higher production, see your Mandaco dealer. Ask about the best production-built land roller on the market. Mandaco, simple design for easy transport and easy use. 12 to 62 foot widths, heavy-duty 4x8 by 3/8 inch tube frame, and now available with a steerable wing wheel. Mandeco land rollers, improved soil to seed contact, faster, more uniform germination, less moisture loss. Eliminate downtime due to rocks. See your Mandeco dealer. Visit northcountrymarketing.biz or call 877-915-8790.
Everything is better to the power of Nutrisphere N. Proven to shield against leaching, volatilization, and denitrification, Nutrisphere N Nitrogen Fertilizer Manager helps you maximize the efficiency of your nitrogen applications. In fact, research shows that in 184 corn trials, Nutrisphere N increases yields by an average of 13.2 bushels per acre. Do the math for yourself. Contact your local fertilizer dealer today and take your operation to the power of Nutrisphere N.
Case IH set the standard for improving power and fuel economy with SCR technology, while others were still trying to decide what the standard was. Only efficient power from Case IH is proven in the field 10,000 times over. And you'll find it in all our high horsepower equipment, from tractors to combines to sprayers. The world of farming is changing. Will you be ready?
I'm ready.
To learn more about how you can be ready with a proven leader, visit caseih.com/efficientpower.
Hey Brian, it's Farm Guy.
What brings you to our farm?
I watch Ag PhD every week and know that you guys do a lot of field testing.
We test a lot of products here, and when something works, we use it on our farm.
Oh, like agriculture liquid fertilizers. You guys started talking about ProGerminator and SureK on the show a few years ago.
But I was skeptical.
You're always skeptical.
Should Brian be skeptical of agro-liquid fertilizers? Find out at www.farmguytv.com.
It takes a whole team of people to record a song. Hey everybody, I'm Steve Azar, singer, songwriter, and recording artist. I'd like you to meet Mike Larson, an attorney at Swenson Investments and Commodities.
Like recording a hit country song, it takes a team to put together a good farm estate plan. I work with you, your attorneys, your bankers, and your advisors. What are my chances of touring with you?
About as good as growing a head of hair. Call Mike Larson at Swenson Investments and Commodities.
Corn rootworm resistance to Bt rootworm traits has gotten to be a big issue over the last few years, Darren.
Well, it certainly has, and we're talking about the single trait. So just one rootworm Bt protection trait in a hybrid.
So in other words, Yield Guard or Herculex, something like that.
That's where we're seeing an issue where we have a single trait. Now, we don't see that issue when we have stack traits.
Yet.
So when we've got multiple traits in there, we're still doing a good job. And I heard one researcher put it this way: you've got a 1 in a million shot of a bug being resistant to a single trait. You have a 1 in a billion chance of a bug being resistant to a smart stacks.
The only problem is he's wrong. It's a lot more than 1 in a million that are actually resistant now. And you know, we're standing here in a soybean field and you say, well, you're going to rotate this back to corn, you shouldn't have any problems with rootworms anyway. Well, we do. Here's a corn leaf that just blew into our field. So there are corn fields all around this particular field, and not only are the leaves blowing in, but the rootworm beetles are coming in too. They're laying eggs, and so this next year we have rootworms, and not just rootworms. Some of them are resistant. Now, certainly it's not all of them. This isn't a widespread thing. Entire country, the entire world has all these resistant rootworms, but I don't care if it's widespread or not. I know I've got an issue on my farm. I know Darren's got an issue on some of his ground. So we're not taking any chances. We're going out there with insecticide. But Darren, tell us about insecticide.
But sometimes, you know, that isn't enough, Brian. Like, okay, this year, hey, it was a tremendous drought year. Perhaps the biggest drought that anybody living today has seen. But here's what happened to me. I used a VT3 corn, and I was thinking, I'm just going to put on an insecticide. I really want this particular hybrid. It's got the disease tolerance that I'm looking for, and so I planted that hybrid. And I used a full rate of a dry insecticide, and then we just turned bone dry. We didn't get enough moisture to really get all that insecticide going and working.
Let's talk specific, Darren. I mean, we don't need to hide anything. It was a full rate of Force. Now, Force is the best product that there is. We'll tell people all the time, use Force or Aztec. That's great. Now, I don't know what you're doing over there, Darren, but I've never had any problem with full rate of Force.
Yeah.
And in fact, Just 3 years ago when we first found the first rootworm resistant field we know of in the entire country. It was one of our neighbors, and we had just a half rate of Aztec. It didn't matter, we had half rate of Force on some of our stuff too. Same number he was planting, we didn't have an issue, he did.
Here's the key difference, we actually got some moisture. And you know, that's one thing you can't
True.
control on your farm. You don't know how much moisture you're gonna get. You may get just real small shots. Maybe you get 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch all through the year, and it's never enough to really saturate that soil. You just may not have those granules completely breaking down. Now, I'm not trying to scare you. I think 99 times out of 100 it's gonna work just fine.
Yeah, but even if it does work just fine is 80 to 90% control. Okay, so if you had 1 billion rootworms out there and you controlled 90% of them, is that good enough?
Well, it certainly wasn't this year. And so my strategy going forward is, all right, I'm going to switch to smart stacks. I'm going to not have that single rootworm trait. I'm going to do the 2 traits and try and approach things that way.
Are you still going to put an insecticide on?
I'm also going to put on insecticide.
That's what we're doing with smart stacks on our farm. We're using a half rate of insecticide. And in the future, I'm sure we're going to have to bump that to a full rate. Okay, so one of the other things that you need to do if you're going to hopefully prevent lots of rootworm problems in the future is spray for rootworm beetles in the summer, especially in corn on cornfields. If you want to lessen the number of bugs you have next year, control the adults before they can lay eggs this year, and you're going to have a lot fewer bugs next year.
Well, let's wrap this up. Here's our program for controlling corn rootworm. First of all, crop rotation definitely helps. If you have a 3 crop rotation, that's the best. Plant smart stacks traits. That way you have 2 different genes out there in case there's some resistance building in your area. Use a full rate of insecticide if you need it. With many people with smart stacks, they're just going to use a half rate. That's probably fine. Then in crop, you're going to spray foliar insecticide whenever you see bugs out in the field. If you see corn rootworm beetles, get them under control.
So there are resistance issues all around the country. Are we super worried about it? No, but you've got to manage things well on your farm, and that starts early on. Again, you can start with that rotation really early, but you got to pick the right variety, and you definitely want to be using some insecticide up front. So once you're past planting, you don't have any real good control options. That's the whole thing. People will call and say, well, what are our rescue options? And you know what? It's June, and by then the rootworm damage is already done. It's too late. You got to think about this stuff ahead of time.
Well, one other thing you may have to think about ahead is controlling our weed of the week. We'll explain coming up next.
The Weed of the Week is brought to you by Mandaco.
For lower costs and higher production, Mandaco leads with versatility unmatched. Twister is the vertical tillage unit for no-till as well as conventional tillage. See your Mandaco dealer. Visit northcountrymarketing.biz or call 877-915-8790.
Weed of the week is Musk Thistle.
Darren, this one is a biennial. We see it out in pastures all the time. What is going to tip us off between Musk Thistle and Boll Thistle, for example? How am I going to tell the difference? Because they're both biennials.
Well, there's a lot of confusion about thistle identification, but you look at the leaves, Brian, and if you've got hairless leaves with a prominent white midrib, chances are you've got Musk Thistle. Okay, and if you have Musk Thistle, here's what we want you to do to control it. The very best product out there in pastures, because that's where we usually see this, is Milestone. Now, Tordon's pretty good too, but we think Milestone is even just a step better. If you want to go out with 2,4-D, you can do that, but I would suggest using at least 1 full quart of LV6, maybe even a little bit more than that, and even at that rate, I don't know if you're going to kill it 100%. Well, here's the other problem is a lot of guys think, well, as long as I can kill it before it sheds those seeds, I'm going to be fine. I'll kill those seeds. No, you won't. When you kill a thistle, if it's got that seed almost already made, it puts all the last little bit of energy that it has into making that seed viable. Well, Musk Thistle usually isn't a problem out in crops. Generally no big deal. If it was, Roundup would control it in Roundup Ready crops. But I guess the thing I wanted to talk about last, Darren, is I love these biennial plants that one year they look a whole lot different than in year 2. Well, they've got that rosette that stays close to the ground and spreads out. In year 1. That stores up the energy into the fall for that bolt stage where it gets tall and puts the seed heads on in year 2. So if you can get it under control in year 1, the best time to do it is right away in the fall, just before a hard killing frost. That way you get the product moving down into the plant as it's trying to store up that energy to survive the winter. You get a great kill. Well, once again, our Weed of the Week is Musk Thistle, and that's all the time we have for this week's weed. But stay tuned, Iron Talk is coming up next.
Iron Talk is brought to you by Case IH.
The world of farming is changing. From the power and versatility of Steiger and Magnum tractors to the legendary reliability of axial flow combines, Case IH can help you be ready. To learn more, visit caseih.com/be ready.
If you're your system on your farm is conventional tillage, should you do it in the fall or should you wait till the spring? We'll discuss in today's Iron Talk. Well, with hard ground in the drought areas this year, there have been many farmers that have said, you know, maybe I'll just wait and do tillage later after we get some moisture. I'm looking at it the opposite way. I think we should get the tillage done now because we've got more time if we do make a mistake to get some moisture and get a little forgiveness later on. A good example for us has been our field day site on our farm. That ground has been hard with all the equipment that's run over it and all the people that have run over it. And last year that ground was just rock hard. We got it worked up in the fall, but we still had a few lumps. Now, normally we'll catch some freeze-thaw activity or a little bit of snow over the winter, and that'll help break those lumps up by spring. This year, if you've got some hard compacted soils, what you need to do is get out there and get it done. It may take 2 passes to do what you normally accomplish with 1, and what I would suggest is don't go quite so deep with that first pass. You may have to basically pre-rip that ground and then come back with a finishing blow with a second pass. So a lot of guys that normally would do 1 pass of tillage, this fall they're going to do 2 to try and break those clods down so they're a smaller size, and hopefully by spring everything will be leveled out in their ground. Also, by doing fall tillage, and you do give up a little bit of moisture doing any kind of tillage pass, doing it in the fall, you've got more time to reabsorb some moisture and make it back up. This spring, the farmers in our area that waited to do tillage until the spring, they just never had that time to regain the moisture back to the soil, and those fields are the ones that dried out first in a drought year. So get your tillage done this fall. It may take an extra pass to make sure you don't have lumps out in your field, but it'll pay off next spring when it comes time to plant. That's all for today's Iron Talk, and now back to the show.
Back in 1966, Advanced Drainage Systems, Inc. was the first company to start manufacturing plastic agricultural drainage pipe in the United States. And today, ADS continues our leadership with superior pipe production and service capabilities. Our roots are firmly entrenched in the agriculture industry, and we're committed to helping farmers grow their business. With 54 manufacturing plants and 24 distribution yards throughout the world, you can count on ADS and our green striped pipe to be there when you need us. Advanced Drainage Systems, the green striped pipe you can count on.
For lower costs and higher production, Mandaco leads with versatility unmatched. Twister is the vertical tillage unit for no-till as well as conventional tillage. Twister's ease of maintenance is forgiving in rocks and has contour conformity equaling 0 downtime. Our hydraulically adjusted coulter angles make residue management easier and less costly. Spring or fall, the Mandaco Twister vertical tillage unit is the new leader. See your Mandaco dealer. Visit northcountrymarketing.biz or call 877-915-8790.
Looking to maximize yield? Quick Roots is a microbial seed inoculant that allows the plant root to explore a greater volume of soil, the key to higher yields. Quick Roots continues to generate yield response on corn, soybeans, wheat, and more. Quick Roots is applied to the seed so the live microorganisms go right to work, enhancing seedling vigor, increasing the uptake of certain nutrients, including NPK, and expanding root volume. Maximize yield on your farm this season. Call TJ Technologies or your local dealer and get your Quick Roots today.
Case IH set the standard for improving power and fuel economy with SCR technology, while others were still trying to decide what the standard was. Only efficient power from Case IH is proven in the field 10,000 times over. And you'll find it in all our high horsepower equipment, from tractors to combines to sprayers. The world of farming is changing. Will you be ready?
I'm ready.
To learn more about how you can be ready with a proven leader, visit caseih.com/efficientpower.
Closed captioning for Ag PhD is sponsored by Norwood Sales.
Introducing the all-new Backsaver Swing Hopper Auger Mover. Backsavers have interchangeable parts which allows you easy access to move or swing your augers to fit your harvesting needs. Get yours today at Norwood Sales.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's show, but be sure to join us again next time for another Weed of the Week, Iron Talk, Farm Basics, and a whole lot more. I'm Brian Hefty.
And I'm Darren Hefty. Thanks for watching Ag PhD.
Farmers focus on controlling weeds in their fields in order to produce more food. Abundant food supplies help Americans spend less of their income on food than nearly any other country in the world. To learn how farmers do it, visit the Responsible Nutrient Management Foundation at rnmf.org.